The coastal waters of West Africa contain some of the world's richest fishing grounds. These are, however, being increasingly depleted by unsustainable industrial fishing. More than 40% of instances of illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing by industrial vessels between 2010 and 2022 were recorded in West Africa. This is according to a report by the Financial Transparency Coalition. The report suggested that insufficient regulation and lack of transparency in the sector are the main reasons why illegal fishing continues largely unrestrained. But are these the only reasons? What is being done to squarely address the subject of illegal fishing, particularly in West Africa? On The Square today, we will delve into the situation and its impact on the continent's economy. My name is Felicity Ezewuike, and you're welcome. Joining our gathering are Malam Adamu Aliyu Yahaya. He is the Secretary, Fisherman Association of Nigeria, Benue State Chapter. He'll be joining us in the course of this conversation. But currently we have Dr. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, lecturer in sustainable development and the interim director of Impact, School of Geography and Sustainable Development of St. Andrews, Scotland, UK. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have Desmond Majekodumi, an environmentalist, join us as well. Thank you, sir, for giving us your time on The Square. I will start with you, Dr. Ifesinachi. I'm going to ask, because the data that I have is from the last quarter of 2022. So let's start by you painting us a picture of what the situation is today with illegal fishing in West Africa.
Thank you so much for inviting me to your show. I'd like to start by saying that illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, but primarily illegal and unreported fishing, is a very big issue in West Africa. But I'd like to frame this conversation from the position of overexploitation in general, because legal fishing, or should I say legal exploitation of already depleted stock, is also a problem. And so previous research that has been published by different scholars and organizations have noted that the extent of illegal and unreported fishing in West Africa is such that it accounts for up to 40 to 65% of legal catch. So this means that those that are caught illegally can be up to 65%. It tells you, the extent of the problem. But at the same time, it is also provable that this figure is quite limited in that a lot of the countries in West Africa do not have data. They're not collecting data on these things, and therefore it's quite difficult or impossible to actually say the extent to which this issue is occurring. A second reason for this is also that the clandestine nature of the crime, the fact that it is illegal, means that you're not likely to know how much it is occurring until you actually catch the people that are engaging in this. But the implication, of course, is very extensive and for different reasons, one of which is that throughout West Africa, we already know and feel the impact of pollution, primarily oil pollution, throughout West African countries, including Nigeria, where oil exploration have resulted in the oiling of onshore areas, which a lot of the times is the breeding ground and also the areas where local fishers are able to serve their livelihood. The impact is also very significant to highlight because in Nigeria alone, a 2018 report noted that over 24 million Nigerians rely on fisheries for their livelihoods, over 8 million directly, and the remaining 19-something million indirectly. A majority of the people that are in the value chain, this is the people that are processing and then selling, are women. And so it therefore means that anything that undermines the sustainability of a steady supply of this fish stock have a significant impact on the sustainable livelihood of these people and further exposes them to poverty. And then we can also talk about the impact of climate change in sort of exacerbating this issue. And for this reason, when you take into account the impact of oil pollution, the impact of rising sea level, you find that illegal fishing, which is something that can be addressed through improved governance, more or less exacerbates the issue and pushes many West Africans further into poverty, and which is why I guess is the reason why we're centering on it today.
Okay.
The general picture printed has shown that it is not just about illegal fishing on its own, but the general idea of exploitation of fish stock.
There's something you said that stood out for me, the clandestine nature of the crime itself, and you also talked about inadequate data, even though we do have data, which is sad in its projections. The data is still not accurate enough, if I get you correctly. I'm going to come back to you on that. And of course, the impact pushing fishing communities, particularly women, into a dire situation. But let's bring in Mr. Majekodumi, who is an environmentalist, to give us an idea of what the impact of illegal fishing operations across the continent is having, really, not just on the people, but on the environment. And then we'll come back to you, Doctor.
Yes, it's very important to look at the overall impact, because yet again, humanity is massively impacting on the very life support systems of nature. Yeah, I know we always have been doing fishing, but just recently, over the last sort of 80, 90 years, the technology to do the fishing on a far vaster scale has exploded, and we have utilized this technology to start harvesting massive amounts of fish in all areas of the ocean that it's possible to drop the nets in. And we're doing this fishing in a very irresponsible manner. They have what they call bottom trawling. That is, huge nets will just scrape the ocean bed and tear up everything that is there, forgetting the reality that the ocean is the primary life support system of our planet. From thence comes the majority of the oxygen. Oceans give off a lot of oxygen, and they certainly absorb a whole lot more carbon dioxide than any of the terrestrial manifestations of nature. But at the same time, the life support systems within the ocean are very, very critical. And if you overtax them, they start to break down. And this is exactly what is going on. Illegal fishing off our shores is totally reprehensible. And it is an indication of what humanity is still thinking they can continue to do. But you see, there's certain fundamental laws that if they are broken, the consequences must be accepted. And we're talking of...
We definitely will be coming... We will be coming back to you to get some of the implications, because it is very important while we're talking about the economic benefit and the sustainability of fishing. We also need to look at the impact on the environment. Dr. Ifesinachi mentioned that. I understand we have Malam Adamu Aliyu Yahaya, the Secretary of Fisherman Association of Nigeria, Benue State chapter in Nigeria, joining us. If you can hear me, Mr. Yahaya, could you acknowledge and...
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. It's been established that there is illegal fishing going on, particularly in West Africa. 40% of the illegality happens in this region. My question to you would be, why is it it looks like the region is an easy target?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Good afternoon. Go ahead.
My name is Adamu Ali Yahaya, the State President, Fisheries Cooperative Federation of Nigeria, Benue State Chapter. I got what you are saying. You know, all these things, you know, especially as you said about the fishing, this thing in Nigeria, because our fisheries industry, we form a bylaw, which means that we are not using that in every party and everybody are using on their own. So by poisoning the water or exploiting the water, especially those that are using formalin and chemical, all these things, they are polluting the water. So if you look at now, the fishes, informally in the past previous years, what we have been getting in the water, and this time there was not any fish that can be served to the country. But before, the United States are serving the whole country with the fishing. But now, due to our wickedness, you see how we go to the market and see there was not any enough fish. And our women, especially all these suffering we are looking for our, especially our fish sellers, not our women in the market. You understand? And the people, instead of giving us encourage so that we can now develop our water income like this, so they are now joining and so that they can put in the water so that the water can be spoiled. So how can we be able to? So by doing this, that is what the government call us so that they say that we should form a cooperative.
All right, Mr. Yaya, I will come back to you to explore what's happening in Benue State as well. But let me go back to Dr. Ifesinachi, Okafor-Yarwood. I want to, the same question I asked Mr. Yahaya, why does it seem that the region is an easy target for these illegalities?
I think the main thing is that you could say that the region is an easy target, but another way to look at it is that at the global level, research has shown that the subsidies that is provided by certain government, especially if we focus on illegal and unreported fishing by distant water nations, this is vessels from foreign nations. We see that the harmful subsidies that are provided by their government have allowed them to come this far to West Africa to fish either through legal agreements. The problem, however, is that these legal agreements then allow them to exploit sometimes fishing in areas that is off limits to them, because research again has shown that a lot of the illegal fishing that happens in West Africa involves illegal incursion of inshore areas, and inshore areas are mostly restricted to the artisanal fishers, the local fishers. A lot of the time you find that sometimes the industrial vessels that might have legal rights to operate in those waters are then coming into the areas that is off limit to them, the areas that is reserved for artisanal fishers. That is one way that illegal fishing appears in West Africa. The second is that a country or a vessel might be licensed to operate in country A, say a country like Sao Tome and Principe. A vessel might be licensed to operate in, say, a Sao Tome and Principe. The problem, however, is that it's not licensed to operate in Nigeria. But because of the boundaries between Nigeria and Sao Tome in terms of the exclusive economic zone, these vessels can then from Sao Tome come into Nigeria and fish without any implications for them. Sometimes, I mean, this could be honestly because there is no demarcation of the sea, but also a lot of the times this is, genuinely because the exclusive economic zone of the high seas is not often operated. Sort of patrolled for a very long time. Monitoring, surveillance, and control have been an issue for West African countries, and it's only recently, because of the pervasive nature of this threat and some of the other threats, that we're seeing increasingly more patrols. So it's not just a case of it's happening because government do not care. It is happening because government have sometimes invited those vessels to be there in the first place through licensing or through agreement. And then these vessels are taking advantage of the limitations and the capacity to monitor, survey, and control the activities in those areas to then engage in illegal fishing. But the first thing, and looking at it from the global level, is to look at how harmful subsidies by government, foreign entities, even encouraging this unsustainable overexploitation of our fish.
I'm trying to connect that with what you said about clandestine nature of the crime. Fishing is as old as humanity, if I'm not wrong. So over the years or the decades, we've evolved with regulations and laws and how we can protect not just the oceans, but ensure that the poor people don't suffer. So, is it a question of improper application of the laws that are available, or do we still need more legislation to protect the people and the continent from illegality?
It's clandestine because we're not able to actually catch the people in the act. And I wouldn't say that the solution lies with, introducing new regulations, because the problem is that currently, thanks to international support from the likes of the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, so many countries are updating their laws throughout West Africa. Nigeria is currently in the process of updating its laws. Our current fisheries regulation is guided by 1992 regulation, so you could say it's almost updated. It's outdated. However, they are currently working with the support of the FAO to update the law. The problem, however, is not just updating the law, but implementing it. Because you update the law, you are then able to also ensure that you provide the right tools for the relevant institutions. In this case, it would be the Federal Department of Fisheries within the Ministry of Agriculture, to ensure that they have the tools and the assets to monitor what's going on. This is in the case of Nigeria, for instance. And you'll find that in the case of Nigeria, let's assume that we have the laws. The IDF currently have a patrol vessel. So when we're in collaboration with the Navy, they are absolutely not able to actually go on patrol to see who is fishing in their waters, to see whether they have the rights to be there in the first place. So unless they collaborate actively, and this is, the narrative is almost the same in a lot of the countries. In Ghana, for example, you find that there's a collaboration between the Fisheries Commission and the Navy and the Maritime Police. They form this FEU unit, where the enforcement unit, where they're able to go at sea and monitor what goes on. So the biggest issue actually is not just about the law. The law is important to get it right, so that when you find someone breaching that law or not respecting the regulation, you can prosecute them. But the biggest challenge has been implementation. The assets, a lot of the times, is not there to implement the provision.
Frankly, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised when you say implementation is our bane. But let's go to Mr. Majekodumi. I want to ask you this. Illegal operators, one of the issues, aside from the fishing, is they try to cut cost on everything, including on health and hygiene, with little regard for the welfare and health of the crew. I'm talking about these fishermen now, and the hygiene of the fish itself that we consume. What are the long-term implications here?
Long-term implications are terrible. It is horrendous. It is totally unacceptable, because these guys, they don't care. All they're after is just to maximize the money, maximize the profit. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with, trying to earn as much as you can, but do it in a way that is not reprehensible, like this that they're doing, totally illegal. And then some of the fish is almost half rotten, and they just use all kinds of very, very strange methods. Sometimes they actually pour some chemicals that will stun the fish and even kill the fish, so it's easier to catch. It's totally unacceptable. And they themselves are doing it out of what I can only classify as extreme ignorance, because there's certain fundamental laws that our scriptures tell us about, that nature tells us about. You reap what you sow, and they're sowing a terrible thing into the people, a lot of their customers, and even a lot of their crew. As you rightly said, the crew sometimes are very, very, very badly treated. Anyway, the good thing is that the world has come together just very, very recently and signed an oceans treaty. And this is very, very commendable. It hasn't started to operate yet, but it will do, because there's some very concerned people who have been driven by the information that they get from organizations like your wonderful media organization, bringing the awareness out, bringing the reality of the situation out. We can no longer continue to do what we're doing to nature. We've been doing negative things to ourselves from time immemorial, but we've developed technology now that is impacting against nature. And as the Secretary General of the United Nations said, mankind is waging war against nature, and this is suicidal because nature always fights back. So it's now time for humanity to really, really sober up and evolve into the type of species we're supposed to be.
All right, I'll come to you, Mr. Yahaya, but I want to stay with Dr. Ifesinachi. I want to refer to something you said about the need for collaboration if we're to get some headway in implementing regulations and laws that we have already to watch this illegality. I want to ask, what has been happening in that regard to your knowledge? Is there effective collaboration going on across the countries, or do you think more needs to be done by countries to show commitment to the process?
So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge some of the progress that has been made by different West African countries in thinking more holistically around how they can improve oceans governance and maritime security in their waters. But if I'm to be honest with you, when we talk about cooperation, collaboration, and coordination, we're seeing more of this happening in relation to piracy and hunger at sea, and much less when it comes to illegal fishing. And it doesn't make sense. I mean, the reason this is happening, it's illogical, especially within that millions of West Africans rely on fisheries for their livelihoods. And then if we also then think about the potential impact of people losing their source of livelihoods and how that could make them easy targets in terms of being recruited into criminal networks or criminal gangs. So what we would like to see is ideally the kind of attention, the kind of cooperation and collaboration we're seeing in relation to fighting piracy and sea, which actually have brought about very significant results to the point that in the last 2 years, the figures on piracy have reduced significantly. Nigeria, for instance, which used to be a hub for piracy around the sea, has been removed from the list. And so it tells you, it gives you an insight into how much work has been done. And now that we have an idea of the significance of cooperation and collaboration, I think it's now time for us to think about more broadly how we can take some of the lessons we are learning when it comes to addressing piracy around the sea and bringing into illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, primarily illegal, unreported fishing. The reason for this is that it's not just about the impact that overexploitation of fish stock have on food security or economic security or environmental security, but also that research has found that a lot of the times, or sometimes, some vessels engaging in illegal fishing will almost always also engage in illegal oil brokering, because if they're at the high sea for a long time, they will need to refuel somehow. And based on there's actually evidence of fishing vessels being used for drugs trafficking. So the picture I'm trying to paint is that if you do not know what fishing vessels are doing in your waters, you are not likely to know what else they can be up to. It can be used for illegal arms traffic. And if we look at what's happening in West Africa, especially the situation in the Sahara with terrorism, this is something we cannot afford to do. So I feel that there is room for countries in the region to do more, especially cooperating. I mean, it's not a case of saying, well, buy vessels from these agencies or that agency, but, do more in the way you use the limited assets that you have to ensure that it works well. So first of all, improve your regulation, ensure that your people are trained, and then use the limited resources that you have to work collaboratively for a more effective result.
All right. Do we still have Mr. Yahaya? Mr. Yahaya, can you hear me?
Yes, you can hear me now.
Okay, I want to find out from you what the reality of the day-to-day life of a fisherman in Benue State looks like. Is there any support from the government, and is it a lucrative business today for you in Nigeria?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Did you hear my question, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Go ahead.
Automatically, we started this thing in local countries, and we just try it and see, we go to government. That is why we say, as earlier said it, we register with the cooperative. And this cooperative will enlighten us how we are going to move on all these things. And we are doing this thing. And the worst thing, since we have started this organization, the fishing sectors, the government can now call us and inviting us to be great and to exercise and to form a seminar like this. So one by making this seminar, the main fishermen that we know, after we must do this thing, you cannot hear any other thing. We cannot get any other assistance from any other government or any NGO. So you can see our people now can travel about 5 to 6 hours to where they are catching the fish. So when they go there, especially I hear that you asked of my colleague there about the hygiene. You may go there before you catch the fish and come back. You can see the fish, some are dying and rotted. So what do you think if you carry those fishes to town, how can you sell it? It has been spoiled. So we request that the government should assist us with an engine outboard and the cold room like this, cooler, so that we can put an ice block on it. Whatever we got the fish, then we put it inside. So no matter the hours we take, I don't think the fish will be spoiled. So you can bring it.
From government, Mr. Yahaya, is what you're looking to get. And we're hoping that you get that as well. I'll still try and get back to you, but let's come to the doctor again. I want to reference the illegality and the clandestine nature of these business. How do we begin to address the question of company structure that mask the real owners of these vessels that commit this illegality? We also know that these vessels, you alluded to that, are used to commit other crimes. So how do we tackle that along with, addressing the issue of illegal fishing, I beg your pardon?
So I think one of the first necessary steps is to improve the laws. Like I mentioned earlier, Nigerian regulation, for instance, does not commensurate with today's reality of how depleted our fish stock is, and it needs to be updated, and they are currently working on that. And then when you improve the law, educate the people that are supposed to be utilizing the law you've improved, and then provide the necessary tools for them to be able to implement what you have updated. And so when you talk about companies that the true owners are hidden, so this could be generally defined as beneficial ownership, where the true owners of companies are not always known, which means that the profit from such sector is not even coming back to the country. The countries in the region only benefit from a small amount. So when you improve the law, when you show that the laws are enforced, I believe that to a very large extent, when you're implementing the regulations and when you're cooperating with your neighbors who might have similar experiences of addressing some of these issues, it will be a more effective and sustainable way of solving the problem. Also, we mentioned at this point that we see a lot of these things happening when countries and agencies are coming together to share experiences, but just that it's not happening enough when it comes to fishery sector. It might also mean, again, I'm going to bring this back to the case of Nigeria, that it might also mean that the likes of Fisheries Department of Federal Department of Fisheries of Nigeria might need to become either a fisheries commission or an agency on its own, or even a ministry on its own, because it means that the necessary support directly from the federal government, for instance, given to them to be able to do their work effectively. Currently, they are hidden within the Ministry of Agriculture, and I can tell you for nothing, and this is also documented, they do get the necessary support. And I think the last time the monitoring, control, and surveillance unit of the Federal Department of Fisheries in Nigeria, for instance, were included in the budget was more than 18 years ago. And this is a very important unit when it comes to ensuring that resources are not overexploited, ensuring that the waters are not polluted, ensuring that the companies are sort of adhering to some of the regulations that are in place. And this is Nigeria alone. And for sure, when you go to the countries in West Africa, you would see that a lot of these units are severely underfunded and they cannot function without the necessary support.
Proper
So
funding.
I feel,
Okay.
these are some of the examples that of the things that needs to be done to help them to do their work more effectively.
I'm sure you'll have a little more time to speak on that after we come back from this very short break. I also have a question for Mr. Desmond Majekudumi when we come back. You're still watching Village Square Africa, and we're looking at illegal fishing in West Africa and how we can address some of the challenges that come with fishing and protecting our health in the process as well. We have 3 guests with us on the program today. Let me come to you, Mr. Majekudumi. I want to ask you about how government can better protect small fishing communities from the impact of illegal fishing. Earlier, Dr. Ifesinachi mentioned the impact on particularly women who are at the very bottom of the ladder, so to speak, in getting this fish to us in the markets and packaging and stuff. Some of them have had to find other means of livelihood. So basically, how can government help improve the lives of these people?
That's a very significant question. And the last statement you made about women being at the bottom of that ladder. Part of the reason why they're still at the bottom of this ladder is because women are not being represented effectively in government. We're supposed to be running a democratic system that is representative of the population. And the population of our women is definitely around 50%, possibly even slightly over. And when we look at how that representation is reflected in government, it is not acceptable. So we need to really, really start operating more effective democracy. And also those who apply and strive to get posts in government, possibly we need to clarify the job description a little bit better, because the phrase to describe what you're doing in government is you are a civil servant. Civil servant. And if you're going to serve the people and your primary role is to protect their health and their welfare, then certainly one of your priorities in those areas where you have small-scale fishing going on in the delta areas, and by the way, we have tremendous biodiversity there. We have plethora of aquatic fauna. We have wonderful fish. We have crustaceans, wonderful crabs, and so much variety can come out of there. Proteinous variety, very good health for you. But if you're going to serve the people and fulfill the job description, then definitely government who is in those areas, local governments, you have to go all out to ensure that those places are kept pristine, that they are kept free from pollution. And some of those areas are massively, massively polluted. And also, you have to ensure that there is regulation in terms of the type of vessels that go out, and also regulation on the quality of the fish and aquatic fauna that come back in. And then what would also be very helpful is some basic infrastructures for transportation and also for cooling, which I think one of our distinguished members on this panel had actually mentioned. And these days, you don't need to run an electric pylon to where you want to run your freezer. You don't even need to run your generator. they have solar cooling machinery now. And these are the type of facilities that must be offered for the people in this area. We can no longer continue to be taxing and burdening our women folk.
All right, I'm told we have about 2 minutes to wrap up, so I'll quickly get to Mr. Yahaya and then come back and close with Dr. Ifesinachi. Mr. Yahaya, if you can hear me, I want you to recount for us what women women that fish, what they tell you about their experience and how their work can be made easier.
Can you hear me now?
I can. Did you get my question?
Hello?
I can, sir. Did you get my question about men fishers in your... Okay, go ahead.
I get your question. Are you hearing me now?
Go ahead, sir. I can hear you.
Okay. What happened to our women? You know, as earlier my colleague was saying that the population of our women are 60%. So exactly, we're up to 80%. Let me see here. So our women, all what they are doing on that fishing systems like this. So, you know, most of them, what I can say now, they are illiterate. So that is why we are now sensitizing and enlightening them to put them in the proper way so that they can make that their business work. But in fact, for them to consider how the women are, to teach them to get and more an experience about the fish or fish sellers, especially if you go to the market. Before you come here selling the fish, you can see 20, 30 women are selling fish in the market, but they are not in the good condition. Firstly, to get assistance of that purchase of loans that they are giving the loan so that you can assist them, to help them so that they can do that business. There's no way.
Mr. Yahaya, the audio from your end isn't so great, but I do get that you're saying women need more support and they need most of the things that the men that fish there need for them to succeed. Thank you very much. I'll come to you quickly, Dr. Ifesinachi, and then I think I have a few seconds for Mr. Desmond as well. So what are your thoughts about how we can actually reduce illegal fishing on a long-term basis in West Africa?
I would reiterate what I've said earlier. I feel that collaboration, cooperation, and coordination is the future, because if I say, for instance, that we need to ensure that the agencies are further equipped, these are important recommendations, or that they should ensure that they do not give as much licenses or new agreements, for instance. These are also important recommendations. But I feel that the main thing that needs to happen is for our government in West African region to rethink how they are cooperating and collaborating with each other, and then with different agencies. For instance, the Navy that have the assets, working with those in the fisheries agencies to ensure that patrols are done more often. But before we get to this point, there is, of course, a need for them to ensure that their regulations are updated so that when they catch people engaging in these illegal activities, they can then prosecute them. Another important thing they need to consider, and this is absolutely important because other regions of the world are already doing this, for the West African region to consider negotiating fishing agreements, licensing as a region than individually. This is attainable elsewhere, for instance, in the Pacific regions. This would ensure that first, the target species that are already overexploited are not targeted. This would ensure that they have more benefits as a collective, rather than, for instance, a country coming to Nigeria and say, I want to do this agreement with you, and they're offering a particular amount, and if Nigeria refuses, you can go to another country and offer them even more money. But if there's a collective way of arranging this agreement that you speak as a region, you're able to negotiate as a region, you can then negotiate a block fee for this. Besides, fisheries is migratory in nature, and even though you sign an agreement with one country, it is almost always probable that what happens in country
one country is happening in another. Doctor, I'm afraid I have to interrupt. I'm told we're out of time. Mr. Majokumi, could you just wrap up in 30 seconds? Mr. Majekodumi, I beg your pardon, wrap up in 10 seconds if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we got to give back to nature what she gives us, and what she's given us is our life support system. We got to do this thing with far more responsibility, far more care, far more compassion, far more empathy. You give love and you get love back. You do good, you get good back. So that's what we got to do. And definitely we got to nurture Mother Nature and the mothers and the ladies and the girls of this world. Stop exploiting them.
Indeed, we must stop the exploitation. Time won't allow us, Mr. Yahya. I want to thank you very specially for giving us your time, even though the network wasn't so great. Thank you for speaking with us. And of course, Dr. Ifesinachi Okafor-Yarwood, lecturer in sustainable development and the interim director of Impact, School of Geography and Sustainable Development, University of St. Andrews, Scotland, UK. Thank you for your time. Environmentalist Desmond Majekodumi, thank you very much. All right, as discussed, the crimes involved in illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing go beyond illegal fishing and fishery issues alone. Countries, as the good doctor has emphasized, must continue to collaborate to tackle the issues that arise effectively. Thank you for giving us your time on VSA today. I'll see you next time.